Man reboards plane when he sees wife's welcome sign. He'd been flying for the last 8 hours. Through the airplane window, he could see the airport loom closer. He should have been happy, knowing he was about to see his wife again. But that very thought kept him on edge. His inside shriveled when he pictured her out there waiting for her. He was sure something terrible was coming his way. But for Alan McGregor, this wasn't the first time a successful flight home resulted in a grumbling stomach due to anxiety and the fear of seeing his wife. Anita was like no one Alan had ever met. When wronged, she could hold a grudge for a long time. And as Alan was slowly finding out, for Anita, a long time could easily translate to forever. Alan and Anita met in college a few years back. They began as acquaintances and, after a few weeks, became best friends. They realized their love for each other was more than platonic as the months passed, and they began dating. Alan had no clue that this decision would start his airport problems. It all started when Anita flew out for a business meeting in Los Angeles. Given that the couple lived in New York, the flight itself was long. On his wife's departure, Alan drove her to the airport almost an hour early. Although he was sad to see her leave, he looked forward to seeing what chaos he could cause in their house while Anita was away. Thus began his list of problems. Anita was supposed to be away for a week, yet she called 3 hours after leaving that her superiors had cancelled the meeting. The news caught Alan off guard. He'd spent the entire morning sleeping instead of wreaking havoc all over the house as he'd planned. "Could you pick me up?" Anita asked. "My stomach hurts and I could use some Imodium." "Sure," Alan grinned. This was going to be a day to remember. Anita's flight was about to land and Alan needed to be at the airport. He hopped out of his car with a grin on his face and a massive sign in his hand. He couldn't wait to receive his wife. People giggled as he passed them and he knew his plan was working. The arrivals area came into view and Anita emerged from the sea of people, rushing toward him. Alan flashed his sign at her and she braked, her mouth falling open. "Hey Anita, I have your Imodium." Alan's sign read. Anita fisted her hair, covering her face as she neared. Alan broke out laughing, but deep down, he knew he'd messed up. The can of worms Alan opened came back to bite him almost immediately. That same week, he flew out for a brief business meeting. What he came back to at the airport made his brows draw together. Anita patiently stood at the arrivals area. But she wasn't alone. With her was her cousin Lucinda, who lived a few houses down the block from Alan and Anita. Lucinda held a large blown-up picture of Alan's face. The photo was among the worst Alan had ever taken, yet Lucinda waved it in the air with glee. But that wasn't the worst of it. Anita held a massive sign that read, "We might be first cousins, but would you stay with me?" "First cousins?" Alan cried as he shuffled toward the two. Anita grinned, a hand on her hip as she calmly said, "I had to keep up with the theme." When a family of 5 walked by, she swung her finger between herself and Alan and exclaimed, "Cousins." Alan thought that was the last of his wife's menace on his travels. He didn't know she'd only begun. Alan soon found himself at the airport. Waiting for him was Anita, dressed in an Oompa Loompa costume with a sign that read, "Chocolate and Mint Anita." Alan ground his teeth. How could Anita do that when she knew how much Oompa Loompas scared him? It was no surprise then that Alan was on edge on this last flight as soon as the pilot announced they'd reached New York. What would Anita do next? Anita called to confirm Alan's arrival time before he left London, England. "And don't dare lie to me," she said in her sweet voice over the phone. "Please, nothing over the top," Alan pleaded. "I am sorry about the Imodium sign." "I am, honey." "Sure, buddy." Anita cut the call and Alan knew he was in trouble. The flight from London to New York took 8 hours. To Alan, these hours seemingly compressed into a single minute. He remembered getting on the plane and now he was pulling his luggage toward the dreaded arrivals area. His stomach constricted, his palms drenched in sweat. He scanned the bubbling crowd before him, dropping his bag when his eyes landed on Anita. Anita held up a sign, her eyes streaming with tears. Alan's heart twisted when he read the letters on the sign. He couldn't believe it. "I'm holding a sign," the first part of the large pink paper read. "Also, we're having a baby." A flash of heat burned through Alan. Even he didn't expect what he did next. Alan turned on his heels, storming back to the boarding gate. Then he braked, turning to find Anita's gleaming eyes broadened. He broke a smile at the puzzled look on her face, then rushed to hug her. "You thought I was returning to London," he laughed as he squeezed her tight. "Don't do that again," Anita cried against his chest. She looked up at him, her face beautiful in the airport's light. Alan realized something. "I'm gonna pay for running away like that, aren't I?" he asked, and Anita nodded. She lay her head on his chest again, and Alan wrapped his arms tighter around her. "We're gonna be parents," he said disbelievingly, and kissed Anita's forehead. "We are," she said, snuggling into him. "Our kid and I are going to ruin your arrival each time you land from a flight."